Hello and welcome to another session on Maven. And in this session, I'm going to share with you some interesting internal architecture of Maven and how Maven really works internally. I wish I had known this much earlier in my career, which unfortunately I did not. So that is why I tried to accumulate all my learnings about how Maven internally works in this video. And I think it's important for all of you who are using Java and Maven to understand this, because I know you might be already using a lot of Maven commands like Maven package, Maven clean, compile, Maven install, deploy, whatnot. But it's very important to understand also how these commands are getting executed. Like, where is that compile thing or packaging thing or that installation or deploy thing written within Maven? Is it written somewhere? And how is Maven actually deciding what it should do when it sees a command? So that is why it's important to understand the Maven's overall architecture, which is primarily centered around the Maven plugins. So let's get started. I'm Shomik and I'm a senior Java developer and architect who loves sharing his insights, his learnings over YouTube. So the first thing that we need to understand about Maven is this lifecycle concept. So Maven is typically, or Maven is actually organized into three different life cycles, out of which the most important one is of course the default life cycle, and then there are also two others, which is clean and the site life cycle. You can go to this page from the Maven website to find out this list of life cycle, and I'm also going to copy the link in the description of this video, so you can find that link very easily. So coming back to this life cycle, so every single life cycle has got multiple phases associated within that life cycle, and these phases are typically the tasks that we execute when we are running a Maven command. Like, I'm sure you are accustomed to this command like compile or test or package or verify, install. All these are different phases within the default life cycle. Similarly, there are some phases within the clean life cycle and also some phases within the site life cycle. Now, how does Maven execute the command compile or execute the command test or execute the command package? So Maven does it using its plugins. So Maven is basically composed of a list of plugins, and it knows which plugin it should use to do the compilation or to do the packaging or to do the installation or deployment or whatever. So the list of plugins for the clean and the site life cycles are already mentioned here. So for clean, only this plugin is used, and for the site life cycle, this plugin is used, the Maven site plugin, with the two goals in this plugin, site and deploy. But for the default life cycle, multiple plugins need to be used because there are many phases here, and which plugin will be used actually depends on the POM packaging type, for which there is another page in the Maven website itself, from where you can actually find out what are the different plugins which Maven automatically adds to your project. You do not need to individually or manually add those plugins in your pom.xml. So whenever you create a Maven project which has a packaging of jar, which is one of our most common things nowadays, then Maven automatically adds this plugin to your Maven pom, which you can actually verify by running the command maven help :effective-pom. So these are the different plugins, and these plugins are also associated with different phases. Like, all these are the phases. Like, for each of the phases, Maven uses these plugins. Now, each of this plugin has some default behavior. So now this is another very important thing. So please pay special attention here. What I said is, normally we do not need to add these plugins in our Maven pom because they are automatically added whenever we are creating a specific packaging type like jar or var or EJB or whatever. Now, but if we want to do something special, so each of these plugins has a default behavior. Like the compiler plugin has a default behavior, the resources plugin has a default behavior, the deploy or the install plugin, all of them have some default behaviors. Now, if we want to override the default behavior, for many reasons, we might actually need to override the default behavior. For the compiler plugin, we might want to override the default behavior to use some special compiler argument, like increase the memory during compilation, or maybe compiling against different targets, or we can actually also tweak some other plugins, for example, the install plugin or the deploy plugin to do some custom behavior. So only if we want to do some custom behavior, then only we actually declare the plugin separately, and then we set some special property to the plugin. Otherwise, these plugins will be automatically added to you if your POM's packaging type is of jar. Similarly, these plugins will be automatically added to you if your POM packaging type is EJV, and this plugins for WAR, and the below list of plugins for EAR. And I'm also going to share with you in the description the link to this page so you can see it yourself as well. So this is how actually your Maven POM knows what is the list of plugins it is going to run for a specific project and for a specific command that you are executing for that specific project, because it knows that this is the list of default plugin for a specific packaging type. And if you want to know what is the available list of plugins, Maven has got a lot of available plugins apart from the default ones that we see. So there is another page, and I'm going to also share the link of this page in the description below. And you can see the list of all available plugins. These are the core plugins, and then there are some third-party plugins as well. So again, I'm just reiterating so that you understand. Maven primarily executes your command using its plugins. So depending on the plugin and depending on the command which you depending on the command which you invoke, it will actually use the corresponding plugin to execute your command, to satisfy to run your command. So in this section, what we are going to see is I'm going to show you a demo of a typical Maven plugin in the overall Maven lifecycle. How we can use this plugin to do some special action, and basically every single plugin of Maven has to be attached to a phase within the build lifecycle. Or in some cases, in fact, for all the Maven plugins, whenever the plugin is created, it is always attached by default to some phase. In fact, you can also override that phase, and you can attach a plugin to a different phase if that is applicable. So all this we are going to see in this particular section in context of a typical Maven plugin, which is check style, which can be used to actually check formatting or check the quality of your. So let us see how we can add a custom plugin, check style plugin in this case. Let us go to the project POM, and in the project POM, as you can see, there are hardly any dependencies and there are no plugins which are added excepting this custom plugin, which is this Maven check style plugin. I have added this plugin specifically within the build phase. So that is why this plugin would be added. So if you remember from the previous section, that the build phase and the jar packaging does not actually by default add this Maven check style plugin. So you can add any plugin to your Maven project. You can write your own custom plugin and you can add it to your Maven project, and you can get it executed, provided you actually bind the execution of the plugin to a specific phase. So here the execution is bound to this phase named validate. So if you remember, validate is one of the very early phases in the default lifecycle. So this plugin will be attached to that validate phase and will actually execute the goal named check when this plugin is executed. So how to execute only this plugin? The way that we can execute only this plugin is if we type the command Maven, then the plugin name is check style, and then colon check. So check is the goal. So if I execute this command, then it will actually execute this goal which is within the validate phase, or which is attached to the validate phase. So if I run this command, it's going to run and it's going to throw some error because there are some issues with code formatting. Like I have used wildcard imports intentionally, just so that to show you that this this throws error. This check style plugin throws error. And okay, so now if we want to execute the command maven clean compile, then also it will execute the check style plugin, and then it will go ahead and do the compilation. Why? Because, and this is very important once again to understand why it will execute the check style plugin, because the check style plugin is attached to the validate phase within Maven build lifecycle, and that validate phase is much earlier than the compile phase. So whenever I am executing any specific phase of Maven, like Maven compile, then all the previous phases within that same life cycle will be executed. So if I am executing the command Maven compile, it will first execute validate, then generate resources, then generate sources, and so on and so forth, all those, and then come to Maven compile. Now for each of the phases, it will try to see if there is a plugin which has been attached to that phase. Now, if a plugin is attached to that phase, then it will execute that plugin, and if no plugin is attached to that phase, it will not execute anything. So by default, normally in the validate phase, there is no plugin attached. But in this case, I have defined a plugin and I have attached that plugin to the validate phase. So it will actually execute that plugin in the validate phase. And you can see that if I run Maven clean compile, then it will first come to the validate phase. So it is in that validate phase, and then within that validate phase, it has executed that plugin and got that error. So that is why it could not proceed to the compile phase. Now what I'm going to do is, here is the check style XML, which is used by that plugin to find out what are the rules it will apply. And in this case, I'm going to make this warning from error so that the plugin no longer throws an error. So if I again execute the plugin, again execute Maven check style check, you will see that it will now only give warning and not error. So it has given warnings, as you can see here. Now if I again execute Maven clean compile, then you will see that it can proceed from validate phase onwards, and then it can actually do the compilation. So after validate, it went to default resources, and then from there to default compile, and it has compiled against release 17, because that is how the compiler plugin default configuration is. So I hope you understood now that how did Maven actually execute the compilation plugin. So in order to execute the compile task, it had to execute all the phases till compile task. So it started with the validate and then everything till the compile task, and when the validate phase failed, then it could not proceed. But then when I switched off the error to warning, then it could proceed from validate to the compilation task. Now another thing which I'm going to show you is, if I comment this part, and I can also tag the plugin in a different phase. So if I comment this and if I open the other section, which is reporting, then this same plugin would be attached to a different phase, which is the site phase. So if I do a Maven site now, then also the check style plugin will run. But in order to be sure, what I can probably do is, so see, Maven check style plugin is again running and it will generate the site. So it has generated the site here. It has generated the site here in target, and if you go within site, then it has generated the site here. We can go to index.html. So I will open that index.html from the browser. It will open a site similar to what you can see in the Maven website itself, and from there you can go to the plugins. So I think this is very useful. If you run this Maven site command, it actually gives you a complete description of what this Maven project is about, like the project group ID, artifact ID, and if you go to plugin management, then it shows the list of plugins. And if you go to the plugins, then it also lists that what are the different plugins. So within the build life cycle, it has executed, or it can execute, these are the different plugins. And in the for the report plugins, so plugins are also again classified into two types. One is the build plugins and the other is the report plugins. So now this Maven check style plugin is being listed within the or rather listed as a project report plugin. So that is how you can actually attach plugin at different phase and at different life cycle stage. So I hope this video was useful, and if you find that this video was indeed helpful and valuable, then I would request you to go ahead and subscribe to my channel, and also share your feedback, and also share this video link with and my channel link with all your friends and others who you think would sincerely benefit from this video.